We often assume a divine open door means a smooth, frictionless path. We expect God's providence to look like a quiet hallway, free from conflict. The Apostle Paul used this exact phrase frequently in his letters, but his definition was entirely different. Paul's imagery of a door is inseparable from plunder. It describes an active, often contested entry into a space previously held by an adversary. Within this framework, the Holy Spirit opens the access point so that Jesus can enter a house to retrieve souls. Because this involves the removal of people from hostile territory, the act triggers immediate, Satan-inspired opposition. Friction, opposition, and systemic pushback do not mean God has closed a door. They are the evidence that one has just been kicked open. If you evaluate God's leading by looking for the path of least resistance, you will abandon His greatest opportunities the moment conflict begins. We see this dynamic play out in real time during Paul and Barnabas' first missionary journey. This map shows their exact route. Their theater of operation is the Roman province of Galatia. This specific slice of geography was about to host a severe conflict, and it would yield a critical theological breakthrough in the early church. The objective was to shift global theology. Rather than requiring Gentiles to convert to Judaism first, they were brought directly into the church. What unfolds across these cities is a forensic display of how apostolic methodology operates under extreme sociological pressure. The record in Acts 14 tracks the missionaries moving east into Iconium. This was a bustling Greek city-state situated on a major trade route, distinct for its resistance to Roman cultural influence. Paul and Barnabas apply their baseline tactical approach. They go to the Jewish synagogue first, leveraging a shared theological foundation. The result is a wave of conversions among both the local Jewish and Greek populations. The opposing forces immediately deploy their first countermeasure. A faction of unbelieving Jews begins working the Gentile population, poisoning their minds against the missionaries to incite mob hostility. Logic dictates leaving. Instead, the text notes they stayed there for a considerable time, anchoring themselves directly in the center of the growing cultural divide. During this standoff, they performed physical miracles. Prior to the existence of a written New Testament, these sign gifts served as necessary, visible credentials to authenticate their gospel message. They only evacuate the city when the divided factions finally unify around a formal, organized plot to execute them by stoning. Extracting souls shatters the social equilibrium of a city. That fracture requires the missionaries to hold the line, rather than default to an immediate retreat. They withdraw 18 miles south to Lystra. The dynamics here are entirely different. Lystra is an isolated Roman colony, and for the first time, Paul is addressing a strictly pagan Gentile audience. He encounters a man lame from birth. Seeing that the man had confidence God could heal him through Paul's agency, Paul commands him to stand, and the man walks. The hostile pushback here does not manifest as violence. It arrives as idolatrous praise. Locals process the miracle through mythology, assigning the title Zeus to Barnabas. Paul is labeled Hermes, and the priest prepares bulls for sacrifices. Paul has to pivot his apologetic method instantly. He cannot quote Isaiah to pagans. Instead, he appeals to general revelation, pointing to the living God who created the physical world and provides rain and fruitful seasons. This is a highly critical point of vulnerability. Praise shifts the attention from the message to the messenger, and it has dismantled far more leaders than physical persecution. If the enemy forces cannot stop an operation with a mob, they will attempt to absorb the mission into the local pagan culture, effectively neutralizing it. That threat is violently interrupted. Hostile Jewish factions from Antioch and Iconium track the missionaries down, arrive in Lystra, and easily flip the fickle pagan crowd against them. The mob executes the exact threat Paul avoided in Iconium. They stone him, presume his body is lifeless, and drag him outside the city limits. As the new local disciples gather around his battered body, God intervenes, rapidly restoring his servant's physical strength. Paul stands up. Then he does something defying all human survival logic. He turns around and walks straight back into the city that just tried to murder him. This physical resilience exposes the core priority of the mission. Securing the newly converted disciples mattered more than preserving his own biological safety. The next day, Paul and Barnabas push 60 miles further southeast to the city of Derbe, successfully extracting more converts. At this geographic point, they face a strategic decision. They are on the eastern edge of the Galatian province, roughly 160 miles from the safety of Paul's home base in Tarsus. They ignore the safe route east. Instead, they turn around and retrace their steps backward, deliberately re-entering the active hazard zones of Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch. This backward loop marks a deliberate shift in their operational protocol, moving from raw evangelism to structural discipleship. They recognize that isolated converts will not survive the societal pressure, so they systematically appoint local elders in every new church, establishing an organizational structure to protect the believers. They also deliver a sobering theological baseline. They instruct the disciples that they must enter the Messianic kingdom through many persecutions. Generating growth is structurally useless if it is not immediately reinforced with church leadership and a concrete theology of suffering. Paul and Barnabas eventually complete their extraction, returning to Syrian Antioch. Their final report is brief. God had successfully opened a door of faith for the Gentiles. This report meant that the gate for Gentile inclusion had shifted. Converts were now entering the church directly, bypassing the traditional requirement of becoming a Jewish proselyte first. This new mechanism provided direct access to God through faith alone, regardless of background. This realization triggered an immediate administrative response. Paul drafted an open letter to the believers in these cities to protect the theological ground he just fought for. That document is the Epistle to the Galatians. Without the physical and cultural conflict of this specific journey, the first inspired letter of the New Testament would not exist. The first doctrinal document of the early church was the direct result of these specific conflicts in Galatia. This leaves us with the central paradox of Acts 14. Divine opportunity is inextricably linked to fierce, mobilized resistance. When you measure God's leading by the presence of comfort, you will misread an open door as a closed one and retreat exactly when you are supposed to advance. The Apostolic Church did not achieve global reach by avoiding hostile crowds or searching for friendly jurisdictions. They secured ground by structurally fortifying believers, preparing them to withstand the inevitable backlash of a plundered enemy. True spiritual opportunity is not a well-lit hallway. It is a breach in the enemy's wall, and it requires the courage to step through it.